Your children are being exposed to narcissistic, toxic grandparents because you're divorced and those were your in-laws. How do you deal with that? Well, there's a few ways that you can deal with that. All of it circles around checking in with your kids' feelings. The one thing that somebody who is narcissistic is never going to do is they are never going to check in with the feelings of another person. They aren't going to ask if they're okay. They're not going to ask them how they feel about something. They're not going to take an interest in somebody else's well-being. What they are going to do is they are going to create situations to make people feel a certain way, to be in control of that person's feelings. It doesn't matter how old that person is. And the younger they are, actually, the worse they're going to be because they have an opportunity to mold into place that ultimate control. So here you are, your children are maybe experiencing triangulation. They're experiencing gaslighting. They're experiencing a smear campaign, likely in reference to you because, you know, you're the mom and not their child, and maybe even in reference to your husband, because they do want to be the ultimate go-to and favorite in your children's lives. And your kids come back, and oftentimes, if you're really listening and paying attention, they will check in and say, you know, Grandma said this thing, or Mommy, do you know, I don't know, I'm just going to take something bizarrely random, like cut all your hair off at night and regrow it, like something outrageous. What you need to do in these situations is check in with your children and say, well, how do you feel about that? Don't make judgment statements. Don't say, oh, that was wrong. Grandma should never do that. That's the worst thing that you can do. Because what you're doing is you're pointing out a behavior that you want your children to actually recognize. And when you're feeding them that information, it's not clicking in the same way. If you say to them, how do you feel about that? Well, I feel like it's kind of a weird thing to say. Well, why is it weird? Well, I don't know. Well, do you think it's true? No. So how do you feel about that? Well, I guess Grandma's lying to me. How do you feel about that? Or what do you mean by that? What do you mean Grandma's lying? Have them really be able to decipher those bad behaviors. And you can close it up by saying, you know what, sometimes people just don't behave very well. Don't say they behave badly. Sometimes people don't behave very well. And it's up to us to recognize that we can't control other people's behavior, but we can behave well. And we can show up with kindness. And we can do the things that we need to do that we know are right. I hope this is helpful for you. Oh, the other thing is don't give too much information. I almost forgot. When my kids were younger, they were in the backseat of the car one day. And they were talking about sex. Sex. I think like TikTok, you know, pushes everything down. And they thought, I didn't know this, that babies came from holding hands. How cute is that? Anyway, they were really little. And as they're talking about it in the back seat, like I'm hearing certain things, but I didn't hear the holding hands part. So of course I'm like, my wheels are ticking. I'm like, oh my God, what do they know? What did they learn? Who said what? And I calmed myself down enough to go, what do you mean by that? What do you guys have a question about something? And they giggled a little because they were really little and that word is funny and whatever. Anyway, they asked me a question about what they thought zigs meant, right? And how babies come into the world and whatever. And I asked them what they meant by the question. And what they really meant by the question was that they were concerned that if they held hands with somebody, that's what would happen. And if I had not asked that question, I probably would have gone into a whole dialogue on how babies are made when that's not what they were looking for in the moment. And it was probably, as I can best recall, not even appropriate in that moment. We as parents, we as human beings tend to want to give lots and lots and lots of information based on what we think somebody is looking for. This translates to everything. It's so important to remember to check in, ask somebody what they mean for clarification so that the information we give is targeted to that one topic, especially with children. I hope this video was helpful for you. And you know what? it sounds like to me that you are a loving mom who is concerned about your children, who is going to be protective of them. And as long as you show up consistently and you're paying attention to things that are being said and done, and being careful not to get involved and sucked into the drama-rama, your kids are going to be fine. It's going to be a harder road for them because they're going to have to learn from a very young age what toxic means and how those behaviors aren't acceptable, and they're going to be exposed to behaviors that they might want to even model, and you are going to have to run interference. But as long as you're being consistent and you're aware of that, that's half the battle right there. I wish you all the best.